Welcome to the Feast of St. Francis 2015. This video contains 3 short films about Pope Francis's call to care for creation and how climate change affects us. This is part of our larger Feast of St. Francis program. Let's get started with our first video, the top 10 things you need to know about Pope Francis's encyclical, from American Media.
Pope Francis has just released his new encyclical on the environment, Laudato Si. Here are the top 10 messages of the new encyclical. First, the big contribution of Laudato Si is an overview of the environmental crisis from a religious point of view. Until now, the dialogue about the environment was framed mainly with political, scientific, and economic language. Now, the language of faith decisively enters the discussion. Second, the disproportionate effect of environmental change on the poor is strongly highlighted in almost every page of the document, and the Pope provides many examples of the effects of climate change, whose worst impacts, he says, are felt by those in developing countries. Third, Pope Francis takes aim at the technocratic mindset, where technology is seen as the key to human existence. He critiques an unthinking reliance on market forces in which every technological advancement is embraced before thinking about how it will affect our world. Christian spirituality, by contrast, offers a growth marked by moderation and the capacity to be happy with little. Fourth, against those who argue that a papal encyclical on the environment has no real authority, Pope Francis explicitly states that Laudato Si is now added to the body of the Church's social teaching. It continues reflection on modern-day problems that began with Leo XIII's encyclical Rerum Novarum on capital and labor in 1891. Fifth, discussions about ecology can be grounded in the Bible and church tradition. In Chapter 2, Pope Francis introduces the Gospel of Creation, in which he leads readers through the call to care for creation that extends as far back as the book of Genesis, when humankind was called to till and keep the earth. But sadly, we have done too much tilling and not enough keeping. Sixth, everything is connected. Laudato Si is a systematic approach to the problem. First, the Pope links all of us to creation. We are part of nature, included in it, and thus in constant interaction with it. But our decisions have an inevitable effect on the environment. A blind pursuit of money that sets aside the interests of the marginalized and poor and the ruination of the planet are connected. Seventh, Pope Francis does not try to prove anything about climate change. Rather, his encyclical accepts the best scientific research available today and builds on it. So Laudato Si draws on both church teaching and contemporary scientific findings from all fields to help modern-day people reflect on important questions. Eighth, Pope Francis critiques those who ignore the problems of climate change, and especially its effect on the poor. Why are so many of the wealthy turning away from the poor? Not only because some view themselves as more worthy than others, but also because frequently decision makers are, for the most part, removed from the poor, with no real physical connection to their brothers and sisters. Selfishness also leads to the evaporation of the notion of the common good. Ninth, perhaps more than any encyclical, Pope Francis draws from the experiences of people from around the world, referring to the findings of bishops' conferences in Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Americas. The Pope calls into dialogue and debate all people about our common home. And finally, this encyclical is addressed to everyone on the planet and calls for a new way of looking at things. We face an urgent crisis when the earth has begun more and more to look like, in Pope Francis's vivid language, an immense pile of filth. Still, the document is hopeful, reminding us that because God is with us, all of us can strive to change course. We can move towards an ecological conversion in which we can listen to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. To use religious language, what the Pope is calling for is conversion.
This is the second video on how climate change affects people around the world, from CAFOD, the Catholic Agency for Overseas Development.
Let's look at it like this. Our world's climate is changing quickly, and scientists are 95% certain that we are the main cause. Everything that we love will be affected by climate change. In the UK, we may be starting to see some effects of climate change, but the impacts are much more serious for people living in poverty overseas. From typhoons or floods destroying entire communities to unpredictable seasons for farmers, the changes are undoing years of work to stop poverty. Did you know that 44% of the people most vulnerable to climate change already live on less than 77p a day? Martin from Myanmar survived a severe cyclone. He says, "Everything was crushed. It looked like all our houses and roads had never been there." Can you believe that 90% of people who die in natural disasters live in the poorest countries? Veronica from Kenya says, "The river has been drying up, which means uncertainty for the food crops." It's a fact that if the Earth heats up by 2 to 3 degrees over the next 20 years, an extra 200 million people will be at risk of hunger. That's more than 3 times the number of people in the UK. But it's not just about one-off events. Changes to our climate can have devastating knock-on effects, starting chains of events that force many people deeper into poverty. The president for the World Bank says, "If we don't confront climate change, we won't end poverty." But we can do something about it. In 2015 and beyond, confronting climate change is our challenge. Millions of people are committed to stopping it. Let's look at some ways we can tackle it. We can make the move to sustainable energy. It doesn't harm the environment and will last for future generations too. Sustainable energy can reduce poverty overseas by providing power for water systems to grow crops, provide lights in schools so people can study. It can also power fridges so medicines can be stored safely. In the UK, we can play our part by choosing to live a bit more sustainably. Maybe by eating less meat, buying fewer new things, and turning off the power when we don't need it. But we can't do it alone. Let's join all our voices to demand that politicians around the world work together to tackle climate change and make the move to sustainable energy. How can they ignore that? So why do we care? It's all about love. Not a flowers and chocolates love. It's a love that puts its life on the line for its mates. It's a love that never walks by looking the other way. A love that dares to respect God, people and creation. It doesn't matter how you get involved. It just matters that you do. Together, we do have the power to tackle climate change. So, how do you see the world?
This is the third video on how climate change affects people here at home, from Catholic Climate Covenant.
A seafood worker is a struggler. They're hard workers, but they get through life with basics. They're simple people. They live simple lives. I started oystering with my dad when I was 5 years old. When I was 13, I started oystering by myself, and I've done it ever since. It has been really tough in the last few years because of the changes in Apalachicola Bay. It's a love-hate relationship between the men and the bay.
Beginning around 2012, we really started to see a dramatic decline in the oyster populations in Apalachicola Bay. The primary driving factor that determines what can live there and what can't is the amount of salt in the water. We really had a serious drought period, and salinities were very high for a sustained time. Scientists have predicted that we will have a continued gradual rise in temperatures and that we will continue to see rising sea levels in our area. Those two factors are going to impact people and the ecology of our estuary systems.
Being a
remote, that doesn't have a lot of other economic engines, we are pretty vulnerable if something doesn't go as planned. Our seafood industry, our tourism industry, most of that is based on the environment, and there's no place else for people to work.
For the poor and marginalized, for those who are hungry, unemployed, uninsured, and uneducated, we pray. Hear our prayer, O Lord, and have mercy. When the environment changes, it has a great impact on people's lives. Vulnerable people are going to be affected by climate change everywhere in this country. And we need to help each other a lot.
The church is concerned about the environment. The extent that changes in the environment affect human beings, then those changes are moral issues. And as men and women of faith, we do have a responsibility to speak out on moral issues. We should be especially concerned of those who are most vulnerable. We have the opportunity to be their voice.
Here in Franklin County, we work to help the most vulnerable in our community.
Don't expect someone to ride in on a white horse and fix it. You can't duct tape it. You can't fix it on the short term. You have to provide a path and support for people to fix it themselves.
It's a hard life. I've considered leaving the Bay and going elsewhere and looking for work, but my heart's not in it. I love this Bay. I was raised on it. My father done it. My grandfather done it. And my youngest son loves the Bay, and he's already oysters, and I'm struggling with trying to get him to seek a new avenue.
Here are a few discussion questions. These will help you think about and apply the material you just watched. Why did you feel called to come here today? What aspects of the videos we just watched especially resound with you? How does Pope Francis's call to care for creation fit into our faith? What do you think, and why? Let's talk about taking action. What would we need to do as a community to live more justly on God's earth? What specific actions could we take? And who among us could take responsibility for moving this forward? Thank you for participating in the Feast of St. Francis 2015. For more information, please visit us at CatholicClimateCovenant.org.